How did we get on this topic when we were chatting? I thought we were talking about breathing techniques, weren't we?
Yeah, so this is kind of like I'm like backing up and like how do we make this into a story that like people can follow? It's called the Yerkes-Dodson curve. And so if you take on the x-axis autonomic arousal,
Huh?
just like how keyed up you are,
Yeah.
and on the y-axis is performance, it kind of forms this like bell-shaped curve to where if you're like barely waking up in the morning, still have sleep in your eyes, haven't warmed up, or you're like super out of it and lethargic, your performance is crap. You
Yeah.
get more keyed up, you get to like your performance goes up and up until you get to a point where there's so much autonomic or like there's so much stress and anxiety that your performance starts to go back down again.
Right.
And so the way the vagal nerve works into that is that um, it's a part of your parasympathetic nervous system. And so the way the nervous system and the body kind of work both ways with each other. Your nervous system gives cues to your body, and your body also gives feedback to the nervous system. And so why would, as a surfer, you want to know anything about the vagus nerve is so that you can recognize when you're on the wrong side of that curve, and you can use those tricks to bring yourself back down to high performance.
Yeah. And now I'm remembering how we got on that topic because we all really sucked in the first session.
Yeah, yeah. And so, okay, there's a whole bunch of different like tricks you can do and most people don't really like, usually getting yourself more keyed up is not the challenge.
Yeah.
For most of us,
Yeah.
we have the fortune of, having we had childhoods, and so we have lived experiences, and so we were really good at getting keyed up and anxious.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're not so good at regulating our emotions back down.
Right.
And so some of like there are things you could do like yoga nidra where you can practically put yourself to sleep, but you're not really engaging your muscles in your body. You have to relax your muscles. It takes 20 minutes to do. It's not conducive to surfing. You're more likely to drown than to become more than to perform better, right?
So
And
don't do
yoga nidra
that in the water.
while surfing on your board. And have, that'll be that'll be point number one. And then there's stuff like we talked about the breathing, and box breathing.
Yeah.
Well, while you're paddling while you're out there waiting for the next set and you're too keyed up, that's great.
Yeah.
How do you, but some people, I've had the problem where I can sit and do that and feel nice and relaxed, and then all of a sudden, like at the surf ranch, you hear that the beehive swarm, and like the engine is running and it's coming toward you, and that big, and I can go from 0 to 100 in no time flat in terms of my autonomic arousal.
Yeah.
And what are the things that you can do in those 2-3 seconds while you're actually moving, while you're paddling even,
Yeah.
to bring that state down. And so there's a couple of things, like some of this is from Andrew Huberman, but it even, some of this predates Andrew Huberman, things that they teach operators, military operators, things that they teach ER physicians,
Mm-hmm.
how do you regulate your autonomic arousal? And so
In
one
about a split second,
in a
right?
split
That's the
second,
key. Yeah. Yeah.
right? And so one of the cool, so this is where the vision discussion came in. is that if I'm looking, and this relates really well to like advice that we give beginning surfers. We tell them, stop looking 3 feet in front of your board. Because and what you're doing is that not only are you not seeing the wave, that's part of it, but as you focus and become tunnel visioned, it arouses your sympathetic nervous system.
Mm.
And so one thing that I've started to do, and one thing that they teach these operators, is to start focusing your attention wider and wider into the periphery.
Mm.
So as you turn back and you're looking at the wave, start to notice everything out on the periphery. Notice the top of the wave, the bottom of the wave, way down the line, way up close to you. So the more you can kind of dilate your visual perception, it brings the autonomic nervous system down. And let's see, Huberman calls it releases a mechanism in the brainstem involved in vigilance and arousal.
Hmm.
So it kind of brings you back into that peak portion of the graph where we're looking to get.
Yeah, I think the trick to that for inexperienced surfers would be the timing issue, because the wave is constantly evolving and moving, and you're trying to basically slow down time by opening up your peripheral. By the time you kind of recognize the open peripheral, the wave runs you over, or or you don't react enough to get around in the section, and then it runs you over. So there's that learning curve too, and I think surfing is specific in that. I can't think of too many instances where you don't have time to maybe open up that peripheral when you're in that moment that you're talking about. Like the military operators probably are the closest to it, like in battle.
Okay. So how can you practice it on land? Like get your heart rate up really high.
Yeah.
Run a 100-meter sprint if it's not going to cause an injury, right?
Yeah.
And then practice it.
Yeah. You have to rile yourself up somehow in that same moment. It has to be that same scenario. Yeah.
Yeah. Think about the last time you had a big wipeout on the reef and walked out looking like you just made love to a jaguar. Whatever it takes to get you keyed up, and then do the thing. And then the only other thing that's kind of a quick thing, and it's like, this is not something you're going to do necessarily while you're paddling for the wave, but you can do it while you're, in that like 10 seconds when you see the wave coming and you're not paddling for it yet. And you see dogs do this right before they're about to fall asleep. And we did this as children, like as a child, like if you can remember when after you cried, you're like bawled your eyes out, and then you're calming yourself, your body's starting to calm back down. And then you do that long inhale with a double inhale.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like
yeah.
If you do that, like that is going to jack yourself way down. And because it stimulates the diaphragm, stimulates that vagus nerve, which drives your heart rate down, and then it drives your autonomic nervous system down. So there's a couple of things that you can think to do, and it's again, there's a learning curve to it. Like you're not going to do it the first time, you're not going to do it on every wave, but did you do it on one wave this session? How did it work differently? How did it feel different?
Yeah, I think that one probably is more is going to be more used if people hear this and they're like, oh yeah, I'm either going to rile myself up and then try to calm myself down a bunch outside, or I'll just do this little before they go for a wave. I mean, in the moment of, like you said, like the momentum to 3-stroke burst sequence, or even just as you see the wave coming, turning, and going.
Every time after you paddle out,
Yeah.
like every time you paddle back out, you catch a wave, you paddle back out, you sit up on your board, you practice those things because your
Yeah.
heart rate is up because you've just been paddling.
Yeah.
It's time to relax and catch your breath. So, and you've got time to think. So that's the time to do it. And then the practice is built in to your surfing.
You don't think that you need to be within moments of catching a wave to practice it?
I don't know. I mean, it's just like I'm no expert on this, right? Oh,
You're more of an expert than I am.
feels good to me. Like I do it and it feels better than if before when I didn't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
like that's all I can really say to people.
Well, yeah, and I think there's something to I think there's a different scenario when you paddle out and your heart rate's high from the paddle out. That's clearing out that carbon dioxide buildup, and then there's this parasympathetic thing that cleansing breaths aren't going to do as much as what you're talking about in terms of bringing it back up to that curve.
Yeah. And
Cleansing breaths. Yeah.
like that's when I do box breathing.
Yeah.
A lot of times I'll do the box breathing and sometimes you're having a session and things aren't like everybody has a session where things just aren't going well.
Yeah.
Like you get a few waves where you miss and you get frustrated with yourself and you get angry and
Yeah.
and that's when so the other aspect of this, like the other thing that we could talk about is just the whole concept of interoception and like learning to recognize when your emotional state is not conducive to surfing or performance in general.
Yeah.
So, okay, these are the times in recognizing like, what are the tools that are most appropriate for this situation? Like if I've got to act right now, the dilation of your vision is a good tool. If you've got to act in 10 seconds, then the double breathing is a good tool. If you've got a few minutes, do some box breathing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I extend it even more if I'm still having an out of rhythm session. I just come in, touch the sand for a bit, reset. Everything's reset, and it's to your point. You have to recognize when you're out of sorts.
Yeah.
Especially when you're learning because you're told you just got to get reps, you just got to reps. So you go out kind of like you would any sports practice. You just kind of roll out of bed and you're like a robot and you're like, I just got to do it. I got to put the reps in. But you're really not feeling it.
Yeah. And I think one of the keys is just to understand that you're not gonna think your way out of a crappy mood out in the water.
Yeah.
We never think ourselves out of a bad mood or feeling down in the dumps. It's you've got to have something inside you has to kind of change to turn the switch on the nervous system.
Well, that's where I have such admiration for professional sports athletes because they could be having just a dog of a match or a game or a heat and not let that negative self-talk affect them as much. And it's stuff I'm sure they're using more advanced techniques than what we're talking about to calm them down. But you see like tennis players that are down, and then they come back. I watch a lot of basketball, so I see that all the time. And then, even the surf heats, the coaches talk a lot about like limiting self-talk because there's this whole element where you can't control the playing field.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's got to mess with your head.
There's a thing that people do in some of the same people that talk about this type of self-regulation bring up the concept of trauma, whether it's PTSD or childhood trauma, and I don't think anybody really like gets through life without having some sort of trauma affecting them. Even if you have perfect parents, you get bullied at school, or somehow you get in a car accident, or somehow everybody gets into trauma. And so one of the things that we do is we dissociate or we become disembodied. and we get in our mind in order to pull ourselves away from the pain and the threat that's present in our bodies. And when you're in that state, you're not performing well. Like, you're not moving your body well. Your timing is not right.
Mm-hmm.
You're not feeling the wave. You're not seeing everything.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so part of it is like just learning to stay embodied. And again, you had that bad, like, trauma is that bad wipeout on the reef, and then you better believe your surfing is going to be a little bit different.
Yeah.
Your reaction to seeing that wave coming it's a little bit different emotionally
Mm-hmm.
than it was before that nasty wipeout.
Yeah. Yeah. So first thing is to recognize when you aren't connected like that,
Yes.
and then using some of these techniques to kind of bring you back to baseline,
Right.
or back to that high performance point on the Yerkes dorsal curve. Did I say that
Yeah.
right?
Right. Yeah, the Yerkes Dodson curve.
Dotson, like the car.
Yeah.
Dotson.
Yeah, I can.
That's cool stuff.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, because you're an ear, nose, and throat guy, right?
Yeah.
Surgeon, right?
Yes. Ear, nose, and throat surgeon.
So maybe you can enlighten us. Our friend Jim
Mhm.
Sigelnik, when I busted my foot, he gave me all these balance exercises to do to get that strength back. And he's like, okay, just stand on one leg, close your eyes, balance. That
Mhm.
right there was tough, bringing the leg back. And then he's like, okay, you got that? Awesome. Keep your eyes open, but turn your head and still balance on one leg. Right. And found that one quite difficult. And he's like, oh, you got that one? Okay, cool. Close your eyes and turn your head. Right. While you're holding on one leg. And then he's like, put this little foam pad underneath my foot and had me do all those sequences again. And it
Yeah.
was the most difficult thing I think I've ever done in my life. And I've done a lot of pretty tough things. But that, like, those simplified things, can you give some insight into what's the deal with balance? I know balance is driven by the cerebellum,
Mhm.
because it's getting communication from that vestibular system in your ear. But what's the deal with the ear? Like, and why does, like, just turning your head mess you up, your balance? Do you know?
So I don't know how much this stuff is like. This is kind of nerd stuff. I don't know how much it's going to help our surfing, but if people are into it, I'm happy to talk about it.
I want to hear about it.
So
So,
the inner ear basically does two things. It tells us where our brain is in relation to gravity.
okay.
Okay. And so, remember, if we're turning in space, or, let's say you're going up on a vert, on a skateboard, you're going up on a wave, the perceived center of gravity it's not going to be the center of the earth anymore. It's going to be toward the face of the wave or that vert. So part of your brain or part of your inner ear tells your brain where the center of gravity is in relation to your head.
Uh-huh.
And then the second is the semicircular canals.
Uh-huh.
And that gives your brain information on um, uh, um, so that's linear acceleration, and then I'm getting a brain fart on it, but basically it's rotational acceleration.
Centripetal.
Yeah,
Centripetal.
centripetal. Yeah, I have to look up exactly, but basically, which direction is your head turning in space?
Okay.
How quickly is it turning in space? And there are reflexes they go to the neck to keep your head stable. There are reflexes that go to your eye to keep your gaze. So, you looking at me on the computer screen, you can turn your head back and forth
Yeah.
and stay focused pretty dang good on my nose, and you can get fairly fast
Yeah.
before you really lose track of it. And that's that reflex going from the semicircular canals to the brain and then back to the muscles in the eyes. It happens as a reflex, happens without any kind of thought.
Mm-hmm.
And so our cerebellum is important in our balance. There are other parts of the brain that are also very important in the brain stem and even in the motor cortex. But the sensory functions that drive our balance are the vestibular system. So where's gravity, and am I turning? Which way am I turning, and how fast? And then your vision provides a lot of cues. So where's the horizon? And again, these are the reasons why pilots fly on instruments, because if you're banking, your vestibular system is giving you false information about where the ground is.
Uh-huh.
Visual system can be giving you, like, you may not have a visual of the horizon, if you're in a storm or whatnot. And then the last thing is proprioception. The third thing is proprioception. And so for each joint, there are nerves that give feedback to your brain where you are, where your joints are, how much each joint is bent.
Mm-hmm.
In your ankles, your knees, your hips, every joint in your spine, your shoulders, your neck, all that information. So all three of those things kind of connect to give you balance. And so what's kind of interesting is that if one of those goes, you can actually stay upright, you can walk pretty okay with just two of those systems. So for example, like somebody has a hip replacement or a knee replacement, walk around just fine. You turn the lights off on them and ask them to walk, they're going to hit the deck.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating. Like that, like, yeah, it's nerdy, but I'm constantly bridging, okay, surfing, right? So you lose the sight while you're getting sprayed in the face. Now, it's different than being on one foot. You have essentially 2 feet planted on the surfboard, 2 points of contact, but depending on your style of surfing, I'm more front-footed. I'd be more on my front foot. So I'm almost on 1 foot. And so if I get blinded, if I can train the way that Jim has taught me to train, the cerebellum will call the motor control neurons faster in my mind.
Yeah, I think you learn, like, you're learning motor patterns on land. And the more you go into like autonomic arousal, you go to like fight, flight, or flee. And if you're it, or yeah, fight, flight, or freeze, right? So if you freeze, or when you get stressed, your body is incrementally, like, you're starting to go toward a fetal position. Like, and you see people when they begin surfing, they're bending at the hips, not at the knees.
Mm-hmm.
Their spine is starting to crunch over. Your spine doesn't rotate as well. Like, when your spine is straight, that's when you get the best rotation. Your hips don't rotate very well when they're flat. You get more hip rotation when there's more extension. So that's one way that the autonomic system moves into it, and then the other thing is that you kind of default to, like, patterns that are not helpful when you're surfing. Like, you want to move away from the danger, whereas what you need to do is push your to get more stability and more speed and get out of the danger. You need to weight the front foot.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. That's a really specific scenario, but that's a great example of how, if you don't have that stuff trained on land, like skateboarding, right? If you've never skateboarded before and not knowing that you're supposed to be more evenly placed over the trucks or even more front-footed on the trucks at times, you would once again fall backwards trying to get away from it. Right.
Okay.
So it's just a matter of training the brain. And the more you do that, the more you get used to it and the more the brain settles and also speeds up, because those neural pathways will start to fire a lot faster. Because when we watch the pros, man, they can be one-footed, their head turned, their eyes closed, and somehow out of all that turbulent whitewater, they find the surfboard, right the ship, and ride out of whatever crazy maneuver they did. And it's like, for you and I, regular Joes, we'd be like, that was pure luck for us. But for them, it's like part of that nervous system that rights the ship, that keeps you balanced.
Yeah.
Which I find that fascinating because, like, I don't, because I exercise so much outside of surfing, or maybe it's specific to surfing through X-Swim. I'll try to do these like just simple balance tools when I'm doing my normal day, because I'm like, oh, these are easy to do. I can just do this while I'm, waiting for a call to start, or I'm waiting for a session to start. I can stand on my foot and turn my head a bunch of times. Right.
Do you think that makes your surfing better, or does it make you better at standing on your foot and turning your head?
That's a good question. It's a very good question. So I think both, because I think if you were to take and try to replicate you standing on a surfboard and do that a bunch of times, you still need that kind of base muscular communication between your brain and your muscles just by standing on a stable surface. Right? You need that base minimum. And what I'm suggesting is that I lose that base minimum quite often. Like if you're not on a surfboard often enough. Right. And we're all technically not on surfboards often enough. We're not standing often enough. Not compared to like a basketball player shooting free throws. Right. And so we lose that touch very quickly, even if you're surfing every day. If you're only surfing 5 waves every day, that's better than 5 waves every week. But still, 5 waves a day. Can you imagine telling Steph Curry to shoot 5 free throws a day and that's it?
Right.
So, and I found that through swimming and the sports that I played with, water polo, even skateboarding, is that the more that you get those reps in, the more refined and sensitive your touch, for a better lack of a better word, is, right? And that is what pro surfers have, just down to microseconds. They feel the board differently than you and I.
Yeah, I don't, I guess, so here's where my skepticism comes in, is that like the more you rehearse a motor pattern, the more ingrained it is.
Yeah.
So, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the right motor pattern, or
that it's correlated. Yeah, it's not totally correlated. Yeah, I get what you're saying. That totally makes sense. That's like if we were to just do normal squats, a lot of people would be like, oh yeah, that's really good for surfing. It's like, that has nothing to do with surfing. Like, that's doing a squat on a surfboard is completely different than doing a squat on land.
Yeah. So I that like Clayton does, for instance, like the cardboard surfer,
Mm-hmm.
like to teach people to pump. Like that's a motor pattern, and you like it's something that you get that feeling, like you feel that weightlessness that occurs in that split second.
Yeah.
As you're moving forward before you stop again, and gravity takes over.
Yeah, and then you have to do it again. Yeah. No, it's trying to replicate what we're trying to do all the time. I mean, at the end of the day, everyone's going to agree that the best thing you can do to improve your surfing is to keep surfing. And that's where, like when we were in Waco, I would say that wasn't even a coaching trip and everyone improved.
Yeah.
Everybody got those reps because we got so many reps on our feet. Right. So that's always going to be number one. And so what I think coaches are trying to do is, what can you do when you're not surfing? It's like free throws are not basketball. Free throws are one piece of it.
So I
You know what I
guess
mean?
I think it's somewhere in the middle. Like I don't
Yeah.
think you can become a great surfer just by surfing and not doing any other training outside of that. And I don't think you can become a great surfing just by doing land drills.
Yeah. Yeah. You probably peak, if you're just surfing, you probably peak at some point without any sort of cross training, right?
And I think that's where the video analysis becomes so helpful because there's so much going on. Like there's so many more variables when
Yeah.
you're on. You only get so many opportunities to rehearse. And when you do dry land training, you can say, okay, this is the one thing that you want to change and drill down, and we're going to eliminate all these other variables, and you're going to teach your nervous system this motor pattern. And so you've got that motor pattern on lock, and then when you go back and surf again, you're not trying to learn you don't have to learn a new motor pattern. All you have to do is learn the timing and when to apply it and to apply it with all the other variables added back in.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that all the dry land stuff is going to, like you said, imprint a pattern, motor pattern into your brain that wouldn't be there else, any other time. If it wouldn't come naturally, I suppose, or it would come naturally only after several reps of failure. But again, at the same time, if you think about that motor pattern in the water on a wave, that's already too slow. You're already too slow to react, right? So it's the building the motor patterns, to build the training, to build that secondary unconscious motion.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, you have to be in the water to make it connect, to your point. And it's like, that's why surfing is the hardest sport in the world, or the hardest activity in the world. It's nuts.
There's not, no one ever has enough opportunity to practice.
Yeah. It's awesome. Well, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I was always curious about surfer's ear and that bone growth. And I'm just curious, like, as a last question for you, like, why the heck does the body grow a bone to close the canal?
Right. Well, that's
What
an
do you
interesting.
think? Like, is there science on why, or are they just theories on why the bone grows out?
Well, so I don't know. What are the things that stimulate bone growth? Like for the most part, it's biomechanical stress, right? That causes increases in our bone density.
Yeah.
Why inside the ear? Um, why did God make us that way? Or why is that? How is that a survival advantage?
Right.
Well, I mean, I guess you could kind of create so it happens. It doesn't just happen with surfers, right? It happens a lot of times with sea captains or yeah, just sailors.
It's cold water and wind, right? Or cold
Yeah,
water or wind, right?
there's one theory is that it's really more the cold air.
Yeah.
Because sailors get it and they do everything they can to not get wet
Right.
in the water.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, maybe it's a bit of both mixed in, but either way, the bone just kind of forms this little outpouching or bubble, and it I guess is it trying to protect the more delicate structures of your hearing from damage. Um, I, who knows?
Yeah. Okay. So that's what I wanted to know, is if there's any theories out there on, like, is it can't be survival. Like, do we need our hearing for survival? No. I mean,
Well,
I guess no, I take that back. You could argue that, yeah, part of our survival as humans has to do with our hearing,
oh, absolutely.
but it's not modern day, you don't need it anymore. It's very old school caveman. You need your hearing to survive kind of thing.
Right, but our DNA hasn't really caught up to modern day. Our DNA is
Right.
Stone Age.
Totally. So
Yep.
that's super interesting. Yeah, I always thought it was, oh, is the ears protecting? And then I was like, why is the ear protecting itself? That's just so strange.
It doesn't mean that it is necessarily effective.
Yeah.
All it is there are these there's you have these cells that produce bone, your osteocytes.
Uh-huh.
It's stimulated to lay down more calcium and create bone when there's additional electric current running through them. And a lot of times that comes from just biomechanical stress, like strength training will increase your bone density.
Mm-hmm.
And so for whatever reason, that stimulation of the cold air, it gets those osteocytes moving and they start building up bone where bone does not belong.
Yeah, it's kind of like the kind of like those osteocytes looking at all the other osteocytes on the body and going, yeah, I want to get big too. So let's send some cold air in here. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's do that. Grow. It's like they're getting jealous of the muscular bones, the bones attached to the muscles.
Yeah. So for example, if you look at like the process of fracture repair, like you fracture a bone, the first step in healing is actually inflammation. So there's like blood that goes into it bleeds, it forms a hematoma at the fracture site,
Mm-hmm.
and then inflammation. And that's why they tell you don't use ibuprofen or aspirin if you've just broken a bone, because you're slowing down bone growth by decreasing the inflammation. And so maybe that cold air just creates some sort of inflammation or damage, and it could be that it's not, and maybe it's just to the tissue near the bone that translates into the bone enough to where it gets the message. But it's not, I don't think it's common enough, or or that, I mean, the things we know in science are because somebody thought it was important enough to spend the money to study it.
Yeah.
And so, there's how much money really has gone into some. I mean, we've developed surgeries for repairing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the natural history of the development of surfer's ear, I don't know that a whole lot of research is, I don't think a whole lot of money's been dropped into that.
After this podcast, though, there's gonna be tons of money flowing into that.
Oh, because everybody listens, and that
It's such a compelling argument.
right. It's just such a compelling problem.
Well, man, thank you so much. It's always great talking with you. Like,
Wait, did we just record the podcast?
yeah, it's been
Oh,
recording this whole time.
oh. I thought we were just discussing what we were going to talk about. I wanted to preface this by saying that I'm no expert in surfing. I'm no expert in surf coaching. I'm not an expert in autonomic regulation. I'm an expert in something completely unrelated, which is diseases of the ear, nose, and throat. So I'm like some average dude bullshitting right now.
It's perfect. This might be our best episode.
Okay, good. Okay, yeah. Put that disclaimer at the beginning if you would, please.
That's perfect. Hey, man. Thanks, Carrie. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks, buddy. We'll talk to you later.
All right. See you, man.
Bye.